Fats have no known health benefits and are a major contributor to cardiovascular disease and stroke worldwide. Substantial progress has been made in the last 10 years to remove trans fats from global food supply, but more still needs to be done. On today's edition of the program, we are focusing or discussing the public health threat trans fats with Dr. Njume of he is the General Supervisor for Non-Communicable Disease Prevention and Control Program for Cameroon Baptist Convention Health Services. Stay with us as I'll be right back after this. Dr. Njume, thank you so much for joining me on this edition of the agenda. It's a pleasure knowing that you accepted to be part of us this day to talk about this public health threat. We are talking about elimination of trans fats, which many people don't know about. Before we get into serious business, can you introduce yourself to the million televiewers who are watching us at this time? Because this is the very first time you are coming on our platform.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm very excited to be here. Like you mentioned, I'm the supervisor for the NCD, or the Non-Communicable Disease Prevention and Control Program of the CBC Health Services. And part of our activities include raising awareness on NCDs, the dangers and the threats posed by NCDs to humans and how we can prevent them. And I'd like to take this opportunity to inform our viewers that this month, the month of May, we are commemorating World Hypertension Day and World No Tobacco Day. Hypertension and tobacco use are risk factors for cardiovascular diseases and NCDs, and so we're encouraging our televiewers to know their blood pressure, go to hospitals, go to where they can have their blood pressure measured, and if they are diagnosed with hypertension, they should take medications to bring their blood pressure under control in order to avoid the many complications that can result. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Doctor. We are talking about a public health threat that many people don't even know about. I was having a conversation with you shortly before this production. You were telling me about even medical doctors who don't even know about this situation. What is trans fats? Can you tell televiewers what trans fats are before we get into the consequences or the devastating health consequences of these trans fats we are talking about today?
Yeah, I'll try to make it as simple as possible for us to understand. Trans fats are a type of unsaturated fats. So generally when we classify fats, we classify them into saturated and unsaturated fats. So trans fats are a type of unsaturated fats to which hydrogen is added. So the addition of hydrogen to unsaturated fats makes it to become trans fats, and they are the worst type of fats that one can ever think of or can ever consume. And they are found in many common products that we use every day, in baked foods, in fried foods, in fast foods. And so it's important for us to note that the contents of trans fats in this food is as a result of the oil that is used to produce the food. For example, if you have trans fats in plantains, in fried plantains, it's because the oil that was used to fry the plantains contains trans fats.
Okay, before we come to how to know exactly the product that you are using, how do you dictate if a product contains trans fats? How do you dictate? If, for example, I go to the market, I pick a container of margarine, how do I find out that that product contains trans fats?
Yeah, okay. Before I get into that question, I'd also like to indicate that trans fats are produced naturally too. So our bodies and animals, especially animals that feed on grass, produce small quantities of trans fats which are not harmful. But the harmful amounts are those that are manufactured industrially. So just like you said, when you go to the market and you pick up an item, the best way to know whether it contains trans fats or not is to read the ingredients list. So the food or the item must be labeled with an ingredients list, and then from there you can see the amount of trans fats that it contains. But unfortunately, in our setting, many of our local foods do not have ingredients list, and sometimes when they do, we have no way of checking whether the labeling is complete. But that's the surest way to know whether a product has trans fats, by checking the ingredients list.
Okay, so what are the health consequences of these trans fats you are talking about, devastating health consequences? Because the statistics I have in front of me, I'm seeing some very shocking statistics, especially when it comes to cardiovascular vascular diseases. It's really, really serious, and it's a call for concern.
Yes, the consequences are really devastating. So what trans fats does in the system is they increase the amount of bad cholesterol. So I'm calling it bad cholesterol. I mean, for our audience to understand. So in the body, we classify cholesterol into good cholesterol and bad cholesterol. And trans fats increase the amount of bad cholesterol in the body. When this happens, the extra cholesterol gets deposited on the walls of blood vessels and narrows the blood vessels and limits the amount of oxygen and energy or other nutrients that our organs need. And at the same time, they reduce the amount of good cholesterol. And the function of the good cholesterol is to remove the excess cholesterol from the body. So when we have excess cholesterol, which builds up in the blood vessels, limits supply to the organ. When this happens in the brain, it gets to an extent where the blood vessel is completely occluded or completely blocked, and so you don't that particular organ that is supposed to receive nutrients and oxygen doesn't get it. If it happens in the brain, then the person gets a stroke. If it happens in the heart, then the person gets a heart attack. So
it's serious.
In a very simple way.
This issue we are talking about today is as a result of the actions of most industries. What is the rationale behind this industry inducing this trans fats into food? Yeah, what is the use? Because you said there is no use; it has got no nutritional value.
Benefits,
but why should companies continue to, put this in the products for people to consume? What is the rationale behind their action?
To explain that, I'll try to take us back a little. So initially, the main type of fat that was found in food was saturated fats from animals, and then it was noted that this was very unhealthy, and so there was a move, or there was a trend towards using unsaturated fats. So when that was introduced, the manufacturers also realized that when they alter these unsaturated fats, it could cause the product to last longer on the shelf. And so they hung on that particular advantage. So that's the rationale behind the use of trans fats. When you use trans fats for a product, it can cause the product to last longer on the shelf, and that transmits into economic benefit, because you can sell the product for a longer duration before it gets bad or before it's deemed unsafe to consume. So that's
and listening to you, certainly we need policies to reduce industrial trans fats. And what is the situation in Cameroon?
Okay, before I talk about the situation in Cameroon, maybe I should...
Maybe some statistics. You want to talk about statistics?
Well, yeah, what's happening worldwide.
Yes.
And like you mentioned in the introduction, some progress has been made in the past 10 years to control or to eliminate trans fats. But the WHO in their 2019 to 2023 strategic plan actually highlighted trans fat elimination as a priority. And as of 2022, over 58 countries have put in place measures to eliminate trans fats.
Cameroon inclusive?
Unfortunately, no.
This is serious.
And quite a number of African countries have put in place some measures, but only South Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa, only South Africa has put in place what has implemented what is regarded as best practice policy for trans fat elimination. That is mandating a limit of the amount of trans fats that can be found in any product, and instituting a ban on the use of partially hydrogenated oils in food products. So those 2 points that I just listed are the best practice policies, and so far in sub-Saharan Africa, only South Africa has
certainly we need a lot of education. Like I was telling you off mic, sometimes when we get into supermarkets, we see fruits with some labels, and those labels and numbers have their meanings. If you are picking a fruit, for example, there are fruits that are genetically modified and some are not genetically modified. The population, the common man, does not understand those intrigues that you are saying right now. So, and even some companies are playing a fast one on the population by not even indicating on their products that there is an amount of a quantity of trans fats in the product that they are selling. They produce, and they just when they are doing the labeling, they forget about trans fats, and the people consume. For those who even understand how it works, they don't end up, they end up consuming a product with trans fats.
Yeah, you're very correct. That's very unfortunate, and like you say, we need to raise awareness on this. We need people to know that they could be consuming trans fats simply by picking up an item from a supermarket shelf, or picking up using oil to cook. And that's part of our approach. And like you also mentioned, we need to institute policies that enforce or that limit the use of trans fats in producing foods. So it's also important for us to be able to identify or to ascertain if labels are correct. So we need to.
We have an agency in Cameroon called Annol. I don't know if Annol, they are watching us at this time, they are listening. Do they actually do the job? Because if you do a random sampling in a supermarket, you pick some of the products, you will not find what you are saying labeled. I don't know. There's a video that was played at the introduction of this program. I don't know if the producer can play the video. You are seen in the video in a supermarket trying to go through some products. You were trying to caution the population to always check and find out. So how do you really find out if a product has that fat or not?
Yeah, so it's important for our audience to know that we are trying to fill a gap. Like there's very little is known about trans fats in our setting, and so we are trying to raise that awareness, and then at the same time we are engaging key stakeholders, including ANO, like you mentioned, that's the agency
in charge of quality
control. And we are also engaging consumer groups. We are engaging the Ministry of Public Health and other relevant stakeholders to see how we can put in place these strategies that the WHO has suggested that countries can undertake to guide them in the process of eliminating trans fat. So it's something that needs to be tackled at various levels with all these stakeholders that I've mentioned. And like I also indicated earlier, we need to have a reference laboratory that's able to check the contents of these products to ensure that they meet the standards that we want to set. For example, if we actually put in place a policy that adheres with the WHO recommendations, it would be impossible to enforce it if we cannot validate or check the products to make sure that they adhere to that particular that particular
Okay,
recommendation.
maybe we ask the permission of our producer if he can play that video with the sound so that we can get the message in the video talking about the products, the kind of products you have to, you know, when you get into a supermarket, you have to watch out on the things that you eat. Let's have the video.
Trans fats are a type of fats common in baked foods like cookies and cakes, in fried foods like fried chicken and fried plantain, and in some fast foods like pizzas, hamburgers, and cheeseburgers. Trans fats raise the bad cholesterol in the body, which builds up in the arteries and increase the risk of heart attacks and strokes. They also lower the good cholesterol, which helps to remove the body's excess cholesterol. Trans fats are responsible for over 540,000 deaths per year. They have no nutritional value and no amount of trans fat is safe. I strongly advise that we make healthy choices, read carefully levels of processed food, and reduce the intake of foods that contain trans fat.
Yeah, that's it, Doctor. We have watched the video, and the message in the video is very clear to the population. And how do we avoid, now that we know they are in our foods, how do we avoid them?
I would like to explain what we can do now at this moment and what we hope that we'll be able to do in the near future. So at this point where we don't have any policies and we have no way of checking whether
we are not even part of the people who have signed some convention in ensuring that such things are barred from entering their countries.
So what I would just like just like we saw in the video, we should check the labels or the ingredient list on products. And when you see that the trans fats there is labeled 0, then you are sure that that's...
Yeah, because you equally talked about amount. Even if it is 0.00%, it's still very dangerous to the
so
to the
when
body.
it's labeled there 0, then you at least you are a bit confident that it's safe, at least in that regard. Unfortunately, some products will not have labels. And so my advice would be to consume those products with caution. So you should take them, if you must take them, you should take them in very small quantities. And of course, like we say when we give lifestyle advice for NCD prevention and control, you should take everything in moderation. And what sometimes looks very shiny and tastes very sweet may not be very good for our health.
For the body.
Yeah, so that's what I would advise. We're hoping that in the near future we're going to have policies that actually ban the use of partially hydrogenated oils or limit the quantities of trans fats in foods. So at that point, it will be very important for us to carefully select products that do not contain trans fats. And it's very important for our viewers to also know that there are healthy replacements for trans fats in these products, and these healthy replacements are not necessarily more expensive or they taste as good as well as the products containing trans fats. So it's an issue of encouraging or advocating with the powers that be to implement these policies and cause the industries to adhere to them for the health of our citizens.
Okay, Doctor, you are equally the head of the General Supervisor for Non-Communicable Disease Prevention and Control Program for Cameroon Baptist Convention. Maybe we'll talk a little on the non-communicable diseases. What are non-communicable diseases?
Non-communicable diseases are a group of diseases that cannot be transmitted from one person to the other. So non-communicable diseases are a class separate from communicable diseases, and I'll use examples to make this clearer. Communicable diseases that we have in our setting include HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, malaria, and these conditions are transmissible, so that's why they say they are communicable, they are transmissible. But non-communicable diseases, on the other hand, are these groups of disease that are not transmissible from one person to the other. And there are common examples like hypertension, diabetes, cancers, mental health conditions.
Leprosy?
Leprosy is a communicable disease.
Really?
Leprosy is a communicable disease. So the interesting thing about NCDs is that they are generally long-lasting, and when they start, they don't produce any symptoms. So as opposed to malaria, for example, where you probably start to experience fever and headache and other symptoms, when you have hypertension, when you develop hypertension, for example, you probably never know that you have hypertension until the complications set in.
So where does it come from? The source, the causes of the non-communicable disease?
Yeah, that's another interesting thing about NCDs. NCDs do not have a particular cause, but they have risk factors that increase that increase their predisposition, if I can put it that way.
Okay.
And there are two groups of risk factors. There are modifiable risk factors and non-modifiable risk factors. The non-modifiable risk factors are things about ourselves that we cannot change. For example, your age.
Yes.
Generally, as people grow older, their risk of developing NCDs increase. Another one is the gender. Generally, males tend to develop NCDs more than females, and that's explained genetically. And another aspect is genetics itself. So
yes,
we see that NCDs tend to cluster in certain families. For example, if someone has hypertension, if you look back, you would probably find that maybe his parents or her parents or other close relatives had hypertension. So NCDs cluster in families, and so these, what I've just mentioned, the age, the gender, the genetics, and family history, they are all non-modifiable risk factors because there's nothing you can do about those. But the modifiable risk factors are where we always lay a lot of emphasis because these are things we can change. For example, physical inactivity. Physical inactivity is a very important risk factor for developing NCDs, and that's something that you can choose to do. Everyone can decide to be physically active or not. And
do sports,
there are clear recommendations.
Keep their cars and walk on
exactly, on how we could become more physically active. Unhealthy diets. Unhealthy diets are equally a very important risk factor. And talking about trans fatty acids is an aspect of unhealthy diets, because if you consume lots of foods containing trans fats, then your diet is unhealthy.
It's a bad diet.
So the other modifiable risk factor is alcohol use. So alcohol is a risk factor for developing NCDs, as well as tobacco use. And tobacco is not only cigarette smoking. We talk about tobacco use because tobacco can be taken in many forms. It could be chewed, it could be inhaled, and so all this includes the risk factors for.
So what is your message for, to the population regarding these two pertinent subjects that we just discussed today, trans fats and non-communicable diseases? How should the population keep safe from such, public health threats?
Oh, thank you very much. I would advise our population to know these risk factors for NCDs, especially the modifiable risk factors, and prevent NCDs by being more physically active. In this case, trying to do moderate to intense activity like brisk walking, jogging, at least for 150 minutes a week. So it could be like 30 minutes every day for about 5 days, or maybe for 1 hour every day for about 2
Is there any
4
possibility
days.
of detoxicating the body if you find out that probably you've been consuming a lot of trans fats unknowingly? If you discover that, is there any medical possibility of detoxicating the body from the trans fats?
Well, you will probably have to, I mean, there are a number of tests that we can do that can tell us whether you have the a correct amount of cholesterol in your blood. It will not tell us whether you have more trans fats or not, but at least it will give us an idea of the amount of cholesterol you have, and there are ways of managing that. But the gold standard or the mainstay of managing NCDs is lifestyle modification. And the lifestyle modification centers around the modifiable risk factors I talked about, tobacco use, alcohol misuse, physical activity or physical inactivity, and healthy diet. So if we engage on these 4 modifiable risk factors, we can go a long way to prevent NCDs.
Thank you very much, Dr. Epien Jume. You are the General Supervisor for Non-Communicable Disease Prevention and Control Program at Cameroon Baptist Convention Health Services in the country. Thank you so much for honoring our invitation, sir.
Thank you very much for having me. It's my pleasure.
You're welcome.